We continue now at the top of Daf Lamed Daled Amud Aleph in Meseches Kiddushin. This is Kiddushin Daf 34a. The Gemara is discussing what are mitzvahs aseh shehazman grama and what are mitzvahs aseh shelo hazman grama. The Gemara finishes the list. Utfilin, another example of mitzvahs aseh shehazman grama is tefillin. Rashi says utfilin v'kasavar laila lav zman tefillin. According to this, laila is not considered the time to wear tefillin, so therefore it's zman grama because it's only worn during the day. You don't wear it at night. Inami Shabbos v'yontiv, or you can say that this Tana holds that Shabbos and Yontiv lav zman tefillin is not the time to wear tefillin. Hilkach, therefore, kevan deika shaita delo mechayva ba, since there is a time where you're not chayiv in tefillin, zman grama, who that's called zman grama, that is called a time-bound positive commandment. Ve'ezuhi mitzvahs aseh shelo hazman grama. And what's considered a mitzvahs aseh shelo hazman grama? What's a positive commandment that is not time-bound? Mezuzah, maka, aveda, v'shiluach hakan. The mitzvah of mezuzah, the mitzvah of maka, to make a fence around your roof, the mitzvah of aveda, to return a lost item, and the mitzvah of shiluach hakan, to send away the mother bird. And the Gemara continues, Uchlalahu, but is this really a rule? Rashi says, Uchlalahu bitmi avechichlal kotzavu dechol mitzvahs aseh shehazman grama noshim peturos. Is it really a rule that all mitzvahs aseh shehazman grama, that women are actually pater? Hare matzah, simcha, hakel. What about the mitzvahs of matzah, simcha, and hakel? The mitzvahs aseh shehazman grama, those are also mitzvahs aseh shehazman grama v'noshim chayavis, and women are chayiv. And Rashi says, Vare achilas matzah leil rishon. What about the eating of matzah on the first night of Pesach? Shuchova, that is an obligation. Kedechsib bo erev tochlu matzos, like it says, in the evening you should eat matzos. Uzman goram lo betesvav b'Nisan. There's a time that's supposed to be done on the 15th of Nisan. V'noshim chayavos, and women are chayiv. Kedamar b'psachim, like it says in Psachim. Noshim chayavos b'achilas matzah dvar Torah. Women are chayiv in eating matzah on a doraisa level. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Lo sochal olav chometz shivas yamim tochal olav matzos kol sheyeshno bebal tochal chometz yeshno bekum echol matzah. We learn from that pasuk that anybody who's not allowed to eat chometz is also in the mitzvah of eating matzah. V'noshim isnu bebal tochal chometz, and women, of course, are part of the mitzvah of not eating chometz on Pesach. The mitzvah's lo saseh, because that's a negative commandment that applies to women as well. V'chein simcha, there's also the mitzvah of simcha, that's simcha beregel, the mitzvah to be happy on the holiday. Kedechsiv v'samachta b'chagecha atov vincha ubitecha. That mitzvah includes women as well. You should be happy on your holiday, you and your son and your daughter. And the Gemara continues, v'su, and further, v'harei Talmud Torah, there's also the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, period of Rivya, and the mitzvah to have children, upidyan haben, and redemption of the firstborn son. The lav mitzvahs aseh shehazman grama, those are not mitzvahs aseh shehazman grama. V'noshim peturos, and women are pater from those mitzvahs. So you see the rule doesn't apply there as well. Rashi says, Talmud Torah, da'amran la'el noshim peturos. We said earlier that women are pater from Talmud Torah, v'chein pidyan haben kid la'el beperk, and we said that by pidyan haben also earlier in the parak. Upiriya v'rivya, and there's also the mitzvah of periya v'rivya, amrin and b'yavamas. That we said in Yavamas, ha'ish mitzuva periya v'rivya, that a man is commanded in periya v'rivya and having children, avalo ha'isha, but it's not a mitzvah, it's not an obligation for women. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, Ein lemeidin min haklalos, we cannot learn out from klalos, you can't learn out from general rules. V'afilu b'makom shenemar bo chutz, even in situations where the word chutz is used, where there's an exception. And Rashi explains, Ein lemeidin min haklalos, kol heichad atani klal, meaning anytime a Mishnah, for example, will say klal, the general rule is as follows, ki hai gavna, like in our case, kol mitzvahs aseh v'chulu, that all mitzvahs aseh shehazman grama, women are pater, v'chol mitzvahs lo aseh, and all mitzvahs lo aseh, they're chayiv. Or another example, Hakol Chayav in B'Re'iyah, everyone is Chayiv in Re'iyah, in going up for the regel. Ein Lemeidin Mehem, you can't learn from them and say that there are no exceptions. The Ikabu, the Lav Dafka, some of them are Lav Dafka, there might be exceptions. V'afilu Mokum Shenemar Bo Chutz, even in a situation where it says Chutz, the Ika Lememar Mi Da'apik Hai, Da'apik Shmamino Da'afko, you could say from the fact they excluded this specific case, it must be that everything else is included, there are no other exceptions. V'lo Shayar Midi, nothing's been left off. Afilu Hachi, nevertheless, Ein Lemeidin, you can't learn out. There could be other exceptions. And the Gemara continues and demonstrates this, Ditnan, because we learned in a Mishnah, B'chol ma'arvinu mishtatvin chutz min hamayim v'melech. It says that you can use, when you're making an eruv, or you're making a shitufei mavos, you can use any kind of food, except for water and salt. And the Gemara notes, V'su lekar, there are no other exceptions? There are other exceptions. V'oika kamein upitrios, for example, mushrooms and truffles, those also cannot be used. Ela ein lemeidin min haklalos v'afilu b'makom shenemar bo chutz. Rather, you have to say, we can't learn out from klalos, even in a situation where the word chutz is used, like over here where it says chutz min hamayim v'melach, but still it could be that there are other exceptions. And the Gemara continues, mitzvahs aseh shehazman grama noshim peturos, by mitzvahs aseh shehazman grama, women are pater, minolan, from where do we know this? Gomar mitfillin, we learn it out from tfillin. Ma tfillin nashim peturos, just like by tfillin, we know women are pater. Af kol mitzvahs aseh shehazman grama, nashim peturos. So too, by all mitzvahs aseh shehazman grama, women are pater. Utfillin gomar lami Talmud Torah. Now tfillin is learned from Talmud Torah. Ma Talmud Torah nashim peturos, just like the learning of Torah, women are pater from that mitzvah. Af tfillin nashim peturos. So too, by tfillin, women are pater. And the Gemara says, "V'nakish tefillin lemezuzah." Why don't we compare tefillin to mezuzah instead? We know women are chayiv in mezuzah. We should compare tefillin to mezuzah and say they're chayiv in tefillin as well. And the Gemara says, "Tefillin leTalmud Torah iskish bein beparsha rishon and bein beparsha shniya." We find the comparison between tefillin and Talmud Torah both in the first parsha of Shema and in the second parsha of Shema. Tefillin lemezuzah, but when it comes to comparing tefillin and mezuzah, beparsha shniya lo iskish, we do not find such a comparison in the second parsha of Shema. But the Gemara continues, "V'nakish mezuzah leTalmud Torah." Why not compare mezuzah to Talmud Torah and say that by mezuzah they should be exempt? And the Gemara says, "Lo sal kadaitach." Don't think that is the case. T'chsiv, because it's written, "L'man yirbu yemechem." It says that in order for your days to be lengthy, gavre boy chayi noshe lo boy chayi. Do men need to live a long life and women don't need to live? Of course, that applies to everyone. And "L'man yirbu yemechem" is going on mezuzah, and therefore we know that they are chayiv in mezuzah. And Rashi explains, Gemiri mi Talmud Torah, we learn out tefillin from Talmud Torah, the iskish la'adadi, they're compared to each other, v'shinantam levanecha, it says v'shinantam levanecha in Shema, uchsib basrei ukshartam los, and then it says ukshartam los, that's a comparison between Talmud Torah and tefillin. Ma Talmud Torah nashim peturos, just like by Talmud Torah, women are pater, d'chsiv levanecha v'lo livnosecha, that we know because it's written livvanecha, to your sons, not your daughters. Af tefillin nashim peturos, so too by tefillin, nashim are going to be pater, women will be pater. V'nakish tefillin lemezuzah. The Gemara then said, why don't we compare tefillin to mezuzah l'chayiv anashim? In other words, we should say they're chayiv in tefillin. D'achsib basrei uchsavtem al mezuzos, because it also mentions mezuzah over there. V'neima ma mezuzah nashim chayavos kedelakamon, af tefillin nashim chayavos. We should say that just like by mezuzah women are chayiv, so too by tefillin. When it comes to tefillin and Talmud Torah, they're compared in the first parsha of Shema, like we just explained, and also in the second parsha of Shema. It says, it says it's going to be letotafos, that's a reference to the tefillin shel rosh. And then it also says, that's a reference to Talmud Torah. Tefillin lemezuzah lo iskish b'shniya, but when it comes to tefillin and mezuzah, they're not compared in the second parsha, Talmud Torah mafsik beineim, because even though mezuzah is mentioned in the second parsha of Shema, but there's something between tefillin and mezuzah. You have Talmud Torah that is in between. It creates a hefsek, therefore there's no comparison between tefillin and mezuzah. V'nakish mezuzah la Talmud Torah. Then the Gemara asks, let's compare mezuzah to Talmud Torah and say that they're pater by mezuzah. Kid iskish beparsha shniya, again, like we find the comparison in the second parsha of Shema. T'samach le uchsavtem v'neim nashim peturos. Again, it says uchsavtem over there. We should say women are pater from mezuzah. And the Gemara says, lo sal kadaitach lift or nashim. Don't think to say that women are pater from mezuzah, because the reward of mezuzah is riboy yamim, is a lengthening of days, a long life. And women also, they need life as well, and so therefore they are included in this mitzvah. And the Gemara continues, Varei Sukkah, but what about that which we find by the mitzvah of Sukkah, which women we say are pater, but it's for a different reason. The mitzvah Saseh Shehazman Grama, because Sukkah is a mitzvah Saseh Shehazman Grama, it's a time-bound positive commandment. It says that you should dwell in the sukkah for 7 days. Time of the cause of Rachmana ha'ezrach lahotzias hanashim, and yet over there, the only reason we exclude women is because it says ha'ezrach, and we say the word ha'ezrach excludes women. Halav hachi, but if not for that, nashim chayavas, women would be chayiv in the mitzvah of sukkah, and so that contradicts the rule over here. Here you have an example of a mitzvah saseh shehazman grama, which in theory women would be chayiv in, except for the fact that there's an exclusion in the pasuk. And the Gemara says, Amar Abai says, Itzrich, no, it is necessary. You need that pasuk of ha'ezrach. Sal gadayta chamina, because I might have thought, hold echsib basukkos teishvu. It says that you should dwell in the sukkah, and we learn out from there, teishvu kein taduru, that you dwell in the sukkah in the same way you live in your house. Madira ishvi ishto, just like in a house, just like where you live, it's husband and wife. Av sukkah ishvi ishto, so too by sukkah, it's a husband and wife. And you would have thought a woman should be chayiv regardless. That's why we need a specific pasuk to exclude women. The Rav Amar and Rava says, and Rashi explains, ha'ezrach lahotzias hanashim, the word ha'ezrach excludes women, braisa hiva Meseches Sukkah. This is a braisa in Meseches Sukkah, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Lamed Daled Amid Beis.